This is my backyard. Growing up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Appalachian Mountains were always an escape. They were where my creativity was born and my adventuresome spirit blossomed as I hiked, ran, skied, paddled, and explored the woods with my two older brothers. In the woods, we were all the same. I learned to keep up. The woods always cheered us on and always welcomed us home. After high school, I headed to college and left my brothers in the mountains of Appalachia behind. I took my passion for the woods along with me, determined to study and prepare myself for a career in conservation. The mountains had given me so much. I knew that I must repay them, especially as I continued to watch the environmental degradation going on in my backyard. But suddenly, I realized that there was something in my youth that I had taken for granted. Keeping up with the boys was not the expectation. Suddenly, I was a woman entering male-dominated spaces with gender power dynamics. I did not know how to navigate this. What did this mean? What had I lost? Where did this weakness come from? And why was I living in it? A new spark had been lit in me. I began to read. And never could I have imagined that my environmental frustrations and feminist frustrations could be related. The Icelander saw in the distance a huge bust, in appearance like the colossal Hermes he had formerly seen in the Isle of Pasqua. At first, he thought it was made of stone, but as he drew near to it, he saw that the head belonged to an enormous woman, who was seated on the ground, resting her back against a mountain. The figure was alive, and had a countenance both magnificent and terrible, and eyes and hair of jet black color. She looked fixedly at him for a long time in silence. At length she said, "Who art thou? What dost thou here, where thy race is unknown?" "I am a poor Icelander, fleeing from nature. I have fled from her ever since I was a child. Through 100 different parts of the world, I am fleeing from her now." So flees the squirrel from a rattlesnake, and runs its haste deliberately into the mouth of its tormentor. I am that which you fleest. Nature? Even so. Did it matter that nature in Western culture was depicted as being extraction of resources from nature's nature is depicted as a fallen woman to extract her secrets, to vex it was women who transform and redeem the fallen land protesting pesticides, technology, science, everything is political power. Because every child that is born, some woman had it. The environment, therefore, is a feminist issue. So this exists, and it's called ecofeminism. The relationship between my two frustrations. But what does it mean for the place that I love? Both women and nature are treated as things that can be dominated. This is often rooted under the guise of political gain and economic development. Increasing in popularity as the coal seams begin to thin is a particularly brutal form of mining called mountaintop removal. Mountaintop removal, or surface-level mining, is when coal is extracted from the land's surface downward. In order for this to occur, first the topsoil and all of its subsequent vegetation is removed. Due to speed, this timber is rarely used and is instead burned or disposed of. Then the surface and side of the mountain are blasted to uncover the coal seam, which can require the elimination of up to 600 feet of unwanted material. The remaining waste is dug and then disposed of through the filling of nearby valleys. The coal is then finally extracted, cleaned, and processed for use. The final step is supposed to be the reclamation of the destroyed landscape. According to Appalachian Voices, an advocacy organization, mining has destroyed more than 500 mountains. In 2012, they estimated that 1.4 million acres of native forest had been destroyed and was unlikely to recover on the broken soils that mining leaves. The method of mountaintop removal is gaining popularity over traditional deep mining because in many places the coal supply is beginning to thin due to overmining, increasing the difficulty of access. Therefore, a new method that allows a broader approach to coal seams is needed to recover the coal that remains. The coal mines run everything in Appalachia, or at least that's what the coal companies and politicians want us to think. Coal companies defend the necessity to blow the landscape apart, citing that its increase in efficiency actually increases job opportunities for miners, boosting the local job market. They also defend the necessity of these projects by citing that 11% of the U.S.'s total coal production comes from mountaintop removal, which they say is not an insignificant amount. Rhetoric surrounding coal presents itself as the lifeblood and savior of Appalachia, and regulations are what is to blame for the lack of financial stability from coal.
We're lifting restrictions on American energy, and we've ended the war on coal. This excessive regulation does not just threaten our economy, it threatens our entire constitutional system. And it does nothing other than delay and cost much more. It does nothing.
One of the most frustrating legislations for coal companies that they've worked hard with politicians to overturn is a policy that prevents coal mines from maintaining an idle status. The idle status allows mines, according to coal companies, to simply go on hold and prevent them from shutting down or forcing bankruptcy when the coal market prices fall. This is, according to the rhetoric, to maintain the job availability when lucrativity returns, to prevent coal miners from going prematurely unemployed. Political leaders use this rhetoric, that pumping money into coal to keeping these dying mines alive, will bring back the livelihood of the golden days of coal in Appalachia. The people won't have to change, they say. Coal will rise again, and the government is here to support the workers and the people of this region.
I will promise you to my soul that no one loves West Virginia more than I.
However, this portrayed reality that has won over conservative voters is simply a noise, blaring over the harsh, destructive reality. In recent years, coal companies have paid handsomely in campaign contributions to get and keep lawmakers on their side, who either turn a blind eye to community suffering or prevent environmental regulators from doing their job. The idling of coal mines does not protect the worker, but rather subjects them to the state of utter job insecurity while allowing the coal mines to get away with not reclaiming their mine sites. Additionally, the language of necessity of this coal is misleading. Although mountaintop removal may provide 11% of the nation's coal production, that value only accounts for about 3% of the nation's electricity. If mountaintop removal mining were ended tomorrow, not a single American would lose power, according to one study done by Appalachian Voices. Yet the destruction of the landscape from blasting and filling is far from the end of the negative effects of this unnecessary form of mining. The fill from the blown mountains is placed into valleys, home to major rivers and streams, drastically impacting the hydrology of the region. Water lingers in the porous fills. It takes up chemicals from shattered rock. It also absorbs alkalinity from carbonate stone that mining companies mix in to prevent the disturbed stone from producing acidic runoff, which has turned many streams in mining regions bright orange and lifeless. This completely destroys the plant and aquatic life within and surrounding these streams. Additionally, when the mining is complete in an area, the company is supposed to be required to reclaim said area, meaning that it must return the ecological health of the direct region that it affected and prepare it to return to its previous ecological state. However, as earlier discussed, this process is often delayed by the political loophole allowing for mines to go idle and sit in their intoxicating states with no mining activity. If the reclamation process is to occur, it is unlikely that the landscape will ever return to its pre-mining condition. More likely, the previously forested hillslope will be replaced with flat fields of non-native grasses, leading to a loss of habitat and the disappearance of a system that serves as one of the U.S.'s largest carbon sinks, turning it from a sink into a source. The people of Appalachia are under constant pummel of these forces, but the intertwining of economic and political power prevail to maintain the existence of coal in the region. But the environment isn't the only thing being silenced for political gain in Appalachia. Shauna Codwell grew up in the mountains of North Carolina, and all her life she noticed that women and their folkways were written off. They weren't documented, and if they were, it was just a side note. This translates to work in the home, access to education in the workforce, and poignantly to the access of proper women's health care. Sexual education is almost exclusively abstinence-based. In Kentucky, 47% of pregnancies are unplanned, and 76 out of 120 counties don't have an OBGYN, and some women like to say that it's easier to get pain pills in these parts than some forms of birth control. In a region dominated by male politicians who appeal to the right for their vote, abortion is beyond taboo, and in many cases, either illegal or nearly impossible to access. The words birth control and sex education are banned from media for being too political. At least 162 clinics that provided abortion services have either closed or stopped offering the procedure since 2011. Only one abortion clinic remains in Kentucky, as well as West Virginia, leaving many women over 200 miles from the nearest clinic. If you say you're pro-choice, you're the devil, one student says. This is the expectation of the region, the expectation of waiting until marriage for sex and not talking about it before, combined with poverty, lack of access to health care, and high addiction rates, are putting women in physical danger. But the political culture prevents sufficient access to the women's health benefits the Appalachian women desperately need to lead healthy lives. Zelma Forbes, a 71-year-old math teacher and radio host, better known by her pseudonym Sweet Tater, grapples with finding balance between her cultural expectations and abortion access. She wishes sex wasn't taken so lightly. If birth control was readily available, then there would not be the same need for abortions, she says. But she's a realist, too, which is why she said the choice state in abortion in Kentucky should remain. She's unusual for her generation, and she knows it. Women in this area, she says, are not encouraged to be forceful. The silencing forced against women's health in the political sphere has unprecedented strength on the state and federal level. Appalachia is also a place rooted in family, tradition, and community, which causes women to be even more insular about their struggles. If they were to get an abortion, the whole town would know. This also means that values are shared from generation to generation. Conservative Christianity is valued, which is often used as the reasoning for banning contraceptive and abortion access, and political leaders have learned how to take advantage of this. Donald Trump, who used to define himself as a pro-choice leader, has now become the first president to speak at the March for Life. He also rolled back Obamacare's contraceptive coverage requirement and proposed a budget that would cut programs to prevent teen pregnancy, while sinking millions more into abstinence-only education. The evangelical Christian support is often considered the reason Trump won the election in 2016. Former Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin, they say, is hell-bent on outlawing abortion. Under him, state officials are threatening to close Kentucky's only abortion clinic. And though a pre-abortion ultrasound requirement was recently struck down, Bevin signed a law to ban abortions after 20 weeks and requires pre-abortion counseling for every woman. And an appeal to the Kentucky Supreme Court was denied for the reopening of an abortion clinic because it, quote, lacks the proper state licensing, end quote, a fact that the clinic's attorney denies. Under the pressure of a patriarchal religious and political structure, the voices of Appalachian women are stretching to speak, only to face a torrent of political rhetoric and force. Here the allegory between these two narratives emerge. For political and economic power, the societal structures in place work to silence the women and the environment of Appalachia by blaring opposing rhetoric and exerting force. Yet beyond these two stories, the men in power are not only silencing the women on their rights to reproductive health, silencing the environment from its screaming degradation, but silencing the natural and human community in which these two concerns intertwine every day. The chemicals that seep from fill rock from mining and then into local waterways also make their way to local water sources. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency also found that iron and manganese concentrations surpass drinking water guidelines in at least 40% of wells on the Appalachian Plateau, and in about 70% of the wells near reclaimed service coal mines of the region. Since 2007, peer-reviewed studies by researchers from more than a dozen universities have concluded that mountaintop removal mining contributes to significantly higher rates of birth defects, cancer, cardiovascular and respiratory disease among individuals living in the region where it occurs. In August of 2017, the U.S. Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement suspended a study that it funded through the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine to investigate the health risks faced by people who live near surface coal mines. Not only do the chemicals seeping into the water supplies have negative effects, but the dust from the blasts have been proven to lead to increased rates of lung cancer, and fly rock erupting from the side of hills has been known to injure and even kill, including a 3-year-old in Virginia who was crushed by a boulder weighing half a ton while asleep in his home. These effects transgress from environmental degradation to perpetuating the oppressions of under-resourced women's health. By adding illness and toxins to the home, stressors are immediately added. When a family member falls ill, the responsibilities of the rest of the household immediately increase. If the breadwinner of the home, typically the man in Appalachia, as the female participation rate in the workforce rate is lower here than any other region in the country, reaching 59.4% in rural Appalachia, 10% lower than the national average. This forces the woman to try to enter the workforce, a difficult feat due to lack of precedence, lack of job abundance, and the necessity to try to take care of her children all at the same time. All of this pulls away her time and attention from her personal health. Additionally, finances must be poured into treating the illness, making contraceptives and other forms of women's health care that are often not covered by regional insurance even less accessible. On top of this, the presence of mountaintop removal and the impacts that come with it leave mothers in turmoil. Will her children be able to have healthy futures? Will they be economically stable? Or will they still fall under the mercy of the rhetoric of political and economic leaders? Will the land they were raised on be destroyed? The women and the environment are trapped in the same cycle, their voices silenced by the blaring rhetoric of men in political and economic power. But they are certainly not the only ones silenced. Listen closely to the environment and people around you. Try to cut through the noise. What are they trying to say? Why must we follow this ethic of domination? Can we not be partners, And what can you do to help their voices be amplified?